Good morning, I'm Pastor Dave, and this is your Monday morning sermon recap for Monday, March 15th, 2021. Here we go. There's one thing that comes up time and time again in our world, and that is pressure. We get pressure from others to be our best, to improve, but we also get other types of pressure. And one that comes to mind the most is peer pressure. This doesn't always have a positive connotation, because oftentimes peer pressure can get us to do things we know we should not do. This is something that just happens in our world. It's part of the human experience. But as we're seeing throughout our sermons in Lent, this was part of the experience of the early church. From their example, we see that the faithful will always be a target for those who desire to draw them away from God. It happened at Ephesus, it happened at Pergamum, and here it's happening again at Thyatira. One of the things that sticks out in this passage is Jezebel. Now, it reminds us of 1 Kings when we hear of Queen Jezebel, the wife of King Ahab, who did horrendous things in God's eyes, and in the eyes of many others. Now, Jezebel has not returned. In this case, Jezebel is referring to a woman bringing in and allowing practices into the church that do not worship God. Most of this has come from that society and the pressure those early Christians had to conform to the practices around them, especially in the guild culture of that time. That culture of the guilds that regulated their commercial, economic, and in many ways social lives of the people in that city. On the surface, it's not necessarily a bad thing, but the trouble was that the people were forced to choose between their faith and their economic well-being, because these guilds didn't always engage in practices that were allowable for the faithful. And in this situation, this Jezebel came, leading the people astray by telling them to accept the things that God forbade. She told them it was okay for them to do these actions. So what do we make of this message to that church? The longest of all 7. This one really does relate to us. We live in a pluralistic world where we encounter other faiths, and we need to figure out how to stay faithful to God, to Christ, through all of it. We all need to think long and hard about what this really is and what it means to stay faithful and to do what Christ has asked us to do while loving our neighbors as ourselves, while still being a decent human being, while still witnessing to Christ in this world. It is a challenge. It's not the easiest thing to do, but as we are reminded often in Revelation, we see the stakes, we also know what the reward is. But it's up to all of us to rely on the Holy Spirit and all the gifts of God that have been bestowed upon the church, past, present, and to come, to guide us through this journey of faith to stay true to God. So that's your recap for this week. Remember, we worship at 8:45 at East Salem, Otterbein at 10:15. We live stream that East Salem service at 8:45. We are back in worship. We are cautiously reopening the church and restarting activities. So if you're ready to come, we are here. But until next Sunday, I'm Pastor Dave, and I can truly say I hope to see you in the pews.